The day the levee broke. Two boys were never the same after what happened. Marcus pressed his face against the grimy attic window, watching the murky waters rise inch by inch along Desire Street. Next to him, Tyrell clutched his wounded arm, trying to hide his trembling. The boys, both 9 years old, had been best friends since before they could remember. But nothing in their young lives had prepared them for this moment. "We should have stayed with my dad," Tyrell whispered, his voice barely audible over the howling wind outside. He would have known what to do. Marcus swallowed hard, fighting back his own fear. Just hours ago, they'd been playing football in the street, ignoring the evacuation warnings that had been blaring through their working-class neighborhood. Their parents were still at work, trying to squeeze in a few more hours before the storm hit. Hours they couldn't afford to lose. Nobody expected Hurricane Katrina to hit New Orleans this hard. Nobody expected the levees to fail. "Your dad's going to find us," Marcus assured his friend, though his own confidence was wavering. "He always does when we hide." The memory of their separation played on repeat in Marcus's mind. The sudden rush of water through their street. The panic as both boys ran for higher ground, losing sight of Joseph, Tyrell's father, in the chaos. They'd managed to break into this abandoned house, climbing to the attic as the floodwaters pursued them relentlessly. But Tyrell had slipped on the stairs, gashing his arm on a broken banister. Outside, the wind's intensity grew, and the old house groaned under the assault. Through the window, Marcus could see pieces of their neighborhood floating past, garbage cans, furniture, and things he couldn't identify in the growing darkness. Somewhere in that chaos were their families, and the thought made his stomach turn. "Marcus," Tyrell's voice cracked, "I don't feel so good." Turning from the window, Marcus saw that his friend's face had grown pale, his dark skin taking on an ashen tone. The makeshift bandage they'd created from Marcus's t-shirt was soaked through, and Tyrell's eyes had taken on a glassy, unfocused quality that sent chills down Marcus's spine. "Just hold on," Marcus said, moving to check the wound. "We just gotta wait for—" A tremendous crash from below cut him off. Both boys froze as the sound of rushing water filled the house. The flood had breached the first floor. "Did you hear that?" Tyrell whispered, his good hand gripping Marcus's arm. Before Marcus could respond, another sound reached them. This one different from the storm's constant roar. It was a voice calling out in the darkness. "Tyrell! Marcus!" Marcus's heart leapt. He recognized that voice. It was Joseph, Tyrell's father. He'd found them. But as Marcus moved toward the attic door, the house gave another ominous groan. Through the floorboards beneath their feet, he could feel the structure shifting, straining against the force of the floodwaters. They were running out of time. "Dad!" Tyrell tried to stand, but stumbled, his injury making him unsteady. Marcus faced an impossible choice: stay in their relatively safe attic space with his injured friend, or risk the unstable stairs to reach Joseph. The wrong decision could cost them everything. Through the floor they could hear Joseph's voice growing more desperate. "Boys, answer me." The house shuddered again, and this time, a distinct cracking sound followed. Marcus looked at Tyrell, whose eyes were now wide with fear, then at the attic door. In that moment he realized that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that can't wait. Water was beginning to seep through the floorboards. "Boys, can you hear me?" Joseph's voice carried over the storm's fury, closer now but tinged. With desperation, Marcus made his decision. "We're here," he shouted, moving toward the attic stairs. "Mr. Joseph, we're up here. Tyrell's hurt." "Marcus, wait!" Tyrell grabbed his friend's sleeve with his good hand. "The stairs. They don't feel right." He was correct. The wooden steps leading down from the attic creaked ominously under Marcus's weight, water already seeping through the joints. The house's entire structure seemed to sway with each gust of wind, and the floodwaters below crashed against the walls like angry fists demanding entry. "I'll go first," Marcus said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Then I'll help you down. Your dad's right there, Tyrell. We're going to make it." The memory of last summer flashed through Marcus's mind, how Joseph had taught both boys to swim at the community pool, his patient voice guiding them through their fear. Trust your instincts, he'd told them. But don't let fear make your decisions. Those swimming lessons seemed like a lifetime ago now. Marcus began his descent, testing each step before putting his full weight down. The water had already reached halfway up the stairs, its dark surface reflecting what little light remained. Joseph's flashlight beam cut through the gloom below, illuminating the devastation of what had once been a living room. "I see you." "Marcus," Joseph called out. "Stay there, son. I'm coming to you." But before Joseph could reach the stairs, a sound like thunder ripped through the house. The front wall, weakened by the relentless floodwaters, began to buckle. Marcus watched in horror as a massive crack zigzagged up the wall, water spurting through like blood from a wound. "Dad!" Tyrell screamed from above, starting down the stairs despite his injury. "Get back!" Joseph shouted, but it was too late. The wall gave way with a deafening roar. A torrent of water crashed into the house, sweeping furniture aside like toys. Joseph lunged for the stairs, his powerful frame fighting against the current. He managed to grab the banister just as Marcus lost his footing. Marcus felt himself falling, the world spinning around him. But then Joseph's strong hand caught his arm. In the same moment, Tyrell stumbled on the stairs above them, crying out in pain as his injured arm struck the railing. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Joseph, holding on to Marcus with one hand and the banister with the other, saw Tyrell falling. Without hesitation, he pushed Marcus up toward his friend, using the last of his strength to give both boys a chance. "Take care of each other." Joseph's voice carried over the roar of water and wind. Then the banister gave way. "No." Tyrell's scream pierced the chaos as his father disappeared beneath the surging waters. Marcus pulled Tyrell back from the edge of the broken stairs, both boys scrambling up to the attic as the structure continued to groan and shift beneath them. They huddled together in the furthest corner, soaked and shaking, as the reality of what had just happened settled over them like a heavy blanket. "He can't be gone," Tyrell whispered, his voice hollow. "He can't be." Marcus held his friend tighter, his own tears mixing with the floodwater on his face. Through the window, he could see debris floating past, pieces of homes, memories, lives turned upside down by the storm's fury. Somewhere out there was Joseph, who had given his life to save them both. The weight of responsibility settled onto Marcus's young shoulders. He looked at Tyrell, who had grown alarmingly pale, his wounded arm now hanging limply at his side. They couldn't stay here. The house was dying around them and Tyrell needed medical help. But the storm still raged outside, and the waters were rising faster than ever. A crash from below signaled another wall giving way. The attic floor tilted slightly, and new cracks appeared in the ceiling above them. Their sanctuary was becoming their prison, and time was running out. Through the attic window, Marcus caught a glimpse of something in the distance. A flash of light, steady and purposeful, unlike the chaotic patterns of the storm. It could be rescuers, or it could be another desperate soul seeking higher ground. Either way, it represented their only hope. But reaching that light would mean leaving their precarious shelter and venturing out into the flooded streets of New Orleans. With Tyrell injured and in shock, and the storm still raging, it seemed impossible. Yet staying meant certain death as the house continued to collapse around them. Marcus looked at his friend, seeing in Tyrell's eyes the same question that burned in his own heart. What would Joseph want them to do? The decision came not from choice but necessity. A sharp crack overhead made both boys look up to see water beginning to seep through the attic ceiling. The house had fought bravely against Katrina's fury, but it was losing the battle. "We have to go," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. Tyrell nodded weakly, his usual energy sapped by blood loss and shock. The makeshift bandage on his arm was soaked through, and his skin had taken on an alarming grayish tint. Marcus knew that finding help wasn't just urgent anymore. It was critical. The distant light they'd spotted still flickered through the storm, like a beacon, calling them to safety. But reaching it meant crossing the flooded streets that had become treacherous rivers, filled with debris and unknown dangers lurking beneath the surface. Marcus remembered the swimming lessons Joseph had given them, his voice echoing in memory. "The water isn't your enemy. Panic is." He'd taught them how to float, how to conserve energy, how to read currents. At the time, it had seemed like just another summer activity. Now it might be the difference between life and death. "Here," Marcus said, pulling off his waterlogged sneakers. "They'll just weigh us down." He helped Tyrell do the same, then looked around the attic for anything they could use. In a corner, he spotted an old foam cushion from a piece of furniture. "We can use this to help you float. Your dad taught us about flotation devices, remember?" The mention of Joseph made Tyrell's eyes well up with fresh tears, but he nodded, drawing on some inner reserve of strength. "He'd want us to make it," he whispered. Getting out of the attic proved to be their first challenge. The stairs were completely gone now, leaving them with only one option: the small window. Marcus broke out what remained of the glass using his shoe, careful to clear all the sharp edges. The wind that howled through the opening brought with it the sounds and smells of a city in chaos: distant sirens, crying voices, the acrid scent of fires burning despite the flood. "I'll go first," Marcus said, squeezing through the window onto the sloping roof. The shingles were slick with rain, but he managed to maintain his grip, holding onto the window frame with one hand. He reached back to help Tyrell through. It was then that they got their first real look at what remained of their neighborhood. The street they'd played football on just hours ago had become a fast-moving river that carried pieces of their community like a grotesque parade: furniture, cars, parts of houses, and things they couldn't identify in the growing darkness. The water had risen so high that only the upper floors of most houses were visible. "Look," Tyrell pointed with his good arm toward the light they'd seen. From their elevated position, they could see it more clearly now. It appeared to be coming from the upper floor of De La Salle Elementary School, their school, about 6 blocks away. The building's sturdy brick construction had allowed it to withstand the storm better than the wooden houses around it. "That's where we need to go," Marcus said. "There might be people there who can help us." He hesitated, not wanting to give false hope. Maybe our parents found their way there too. The journey ahead was daunting. They would need to swim between houses where possible, using rooftops and other high points to rest. With Tyrell's injury, every movement would be a struggle. Marcus helped secure the foam cushion under Tyrell's good arm. "Remember what your dad taught us about conserving energy. We'll take it slow, rest when we need to." They began their descent, using a partially submerged tree as a bridge from the roof to the water. The current was strong but not impossible to manage near the houses. The real challenge would be crossing the wider streets, where the water flowed faster. They had made it about half a block when they heard it. A low, rumbling sound, different from the storm's constant roar. Marcus turned to see a wall of water, surging down the street carrying with it a mass of debris. The levee must have broken in another section. "Hold on," Marcus screamed, grabbing Tyrell and pushing him toward the nearest porch roof. They barely made it, pulling themselves up as the surge rushed beneath them. The force of it shook their perch, threatening to tear it from the house. As they clung to the roof, something large shot past them in the water. In the dim light, Marcus caught a glimpse of what looked like a person clinging to a piece of furniture. Without thinking, he reached out, trying to grab them. "Marcus, no!" Tyrell's grip on his friend's shirt was all that kept Marcus from being pulled into the raging current. The figure in the water disappeared into the darkness, and Marcus felt the weight of another life he couldn't save settle onto his young shoulders. First Joseph, now this unknown person. How many others were out there, fighting for survival in these same waters? When the surge passed, they found themselves in an altered landscape. Some houses that had been standing moments ago were now gone, while new obstacles had appeared in their path. The light from the school still beckoned, but the route they'd planned to take was no longer possible. Tyrell's breathing had become labored, and Marcus could feel him shivering despite the warm water. They needed to make a choice: risk continuing their journey in the darkness, or find somewhere to wait out the night. A flash of lightning illuminated a house across the street that seemed more stable than the others. Through a broken window, Marcus could see what looked like a dry second floor, but reaching it would mean crossing the strongest part of the current, where the street had become a river. Behind them, their original shelter groaned and shifted, reminding them that going back wasn't an option. The school's light seemed farther away now, obscured by rain and debris. Whatever choice they made, it needed to be soon. That's when they heard it, a sound that rose above the storm's chaos. A voice, carried on the wind, calling out in the darkness. "Help! Is anyone there?" The voice cut through the storm again, closer this time. It was high-pitched, a child's voice. Marcus and Tyrell exchanged looks. They weren't the only ones trapped out here in the chaos. The voice seemed to be coming from a partially submerged house about 50 feet away, its second-story windows, dark except for the occasional flash of what looked like a flashlight beam. "We have to help," Marcus said, even as part of him screamed to focus only on getting Tyrell to safety. Joseph's final words echoed in his mind. Take care of each other. But wouldn't Joseph have stopped to help another child in trouble? Tyrell seemed to read his thoughts. "Dad would help," he said quietly, his voice weak but determined. "We can't leave them." The journey to the house was treacherous. They moved carefully from their perch, using the foam cushion to help stay afloat while avoiding the strongest parts of the current. As they got closer, they could see a young girl, maybe 7 or 8, leaning out of a second-story window. "Over here," she called out when she spotted them. "Please, my grandma's stuck." Marcus felt his heart sink. They were just kids themselves, barely managing to stay alive. How could they help an elderly woman? But they had come too far to turn back now. They reached the house, finding a partially submerged trellis they could use to climb up. The girl helped pull them through the window. Her name was Sophie, and her grandmother, Mrs. Chen, had fallen. When the water first rushed in, they'd managed to get to the second floor, but Mrs. Chen couldn't move her leg, and the water was still rising. The room they entered was in chaos. Water dripped from the ceiling where the storm had damaged the roof. Mrs. Chen lay on a soaked mattress in the corner, her face tight with pain. She was a small woman, probably in her 70s, and her right leg was bent at an unnatural angle. "The water's coming up through the floor," Sophie explained, her voice trembling. "We tried to call for help, but our phone stopped working. Grandma said to leave her and go get help, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave her." Marcus looked at Tyrell, who had slumped against the wall, his injured arm cradled against his chest. The makeshift bandage was completely soaked through now, and his friend's face was alarmingly pale. They needed help themselves, and fast. Through the window, the light from the school still beckoned, now seeming impossibly far away. But Marcus remembered something his mother had told him about her job as a nurse. Sometimes helping one person means finding help for everyone. "Dabao." "School," he said, pointing toward the light. "There might be rescue workers there, but we can't all make it in this storm. Someone needs to go get help." "I'll go," Sophie volunteered immediately, but Mrs. Chen grabbed her hand. "No, sweetheart," she said firmly, despite her pain. "You're too young to go alone." Marcus felt the weight of everyone's eyes turn to him. He looked at Tyrell, thinking of his promise to Joseph to take care of his friend. But Tyrell gave him a slight nod, understanding passing between them without words. "I'm the strongest swimmer," Marcus said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "I can make it to the school and bring back help, but we need to get everyone as high as possible in case the water rises more." There was a pull-down ladder in the hallway leading to an attic space. Working together, they managed to help Mrs. Chen up, though every movement caused her obvious pain. The attic was small but dry, and through its single window, they could still see the school's light. As Marcus prepared to leave, Tyrell grabbed his arm with his good hand. "Marcus," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "remember what my dad always said about swimming in strong currents?" Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "Never swim straight against it. Move diagonal. Use less energy." He paused, then added, "And come back, Tyrell. You have to come back." The goodbye was quick, it had to be. Every minute counted now. Marcus made his way back down to the window, the foam cushion tucked under his arm. The storm seemed to have intensified, if that was possible, and the water level had risen even in the short time they'd been inside. Just before he climbed out, Sophie pressed something into his hand, a small flashlight. "For signaling," she said, "so you can find your way back. The water hit him like a physical blow as he lowered himself in. The current was stronger than before, and the rain stung his face like needles. The school's light seemed to flicker and fade with each gust of wind, like a star fighting to shine through storm clouds. Marcus took one last look at the window where his friends waited. Tyrell's face was barely visible in the darkness, but Marcus could still make out his friend's attempt at a brave smile. In that moment, he made a silent promise, not just to Tyrell but to Joseph's memory. He would find help or die trying. As he pushed off into the floodwaters, Marcus heard a sound that made his blood run cold. In the distance, the low moan of straining metal was followed by a crash that seemed to shake the very air. Another levee had given way. He had minutes, at most, before a new surge of water would reach them. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, past debris and danger and rushing water, help waited at the school. If it was still standing, if anyone was still there, if he could make it in time. Day. Water was a living thing, Marcus decided as he fought against its pull, not just alive, but hungry. Each stroke forward was met with resistance, as if the flood itself was trying to drag him back to the others, back to the relative safety of Mrs. Chen's house. But he couldn't go back, not without help. Joseph's swimming lessons became a mantra in his head, diagonal against the current. Don't fight it head on. Let it pull you a little sideways while you move forward. Marcus angled his body, using the foam cushion to help stay afloat while conserving energy. The school's light flickered ahead, sometimes disappearing completely, behind sheets of rain, only to reappear moments later like a stubborn star. A sudden surge lifted him up, and in that moment of heightened perspective, Marcus saw the true scale of devastation around him. The neighborhood he'd known all his life had become an alien landscape. Rooftops poked through the water like small islands, some with people huddled on them, their flashlights creating desperate constellations in the darkness. He could hear calls for help carried on the wind, mixing with the storm's constant roar. The sound of breaking metal he'd heard earlier was followed by a distant rumbling that grew louder with each passing second. The new levee breach was sending another wall of water their way. Marcus redoubled his efforts, his muscles burning with exhaustion. Something large bumped against him underwater. A car, maybe, or part of a house. The contact sent him spinning, and for a terrifying moment, he lost sight of the school's light. The foam cushion slipped from his grasp, disappearing into the churning water. Marcus fought down his panic, remembering Joseph's words. The water isn't your enemy. Panic is. He forced himself to float for a moment, getting his bearings. The light reappeared to his left, and he began swimming again, each stroke measured and deliberate. His arms felt like lead, and the cold was beginning to seep into his bones despite the warm August air. A fresh wave of guilt hit him as he thought of Tyrell, Mrs. Chen, and Sophie waiting in that attic. What if he couldn't make it to the school? What if there was no help to be found? What if his decision to leave had doomed them all? The memory of Joseph's sacrifice surged through him, giving him renewed strength. Joseph had given his life to save them. He wouldn't let that sacrifice be in vain. The school building finally began to take shape through the rain, its brick walls rising like a fortress above the floodwaters. The light he'd been following came from windows on the third floor, but as he got closer, Marcus's heart sank. The water had already reached the second floor, and debris had piled up against the building's sides, creating dangerous obstacles. He was looking for a way in when he heard voices, real, human voices, coming from above. "Over here!" he shouted, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Please help! Help!" A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, finding him in the water. "Hold on, kid," a man's voice called back. "We're throwing you a rope." The rope hit the water a few feet away, and Marcus lunged for it, his cold fingers wrapping around the rough material. Strong hands pulled him up through a window and onto solid floor. He collapsed, coughing and shaking, as several people gathered around him. Through blurry eyes, he saw that the third floor had become a makeshift shelter. Dozens of people huddled in the hallway and classrooms, some wrapped in blankets, others tending to the injured. The light he'd followed came from emergency lamps powered by a portable generator. "I'm Marcus," he managed between chattering teeth. "My friend Tyrell, he's hurt, And there's an old lady with a broken leg and a little girl. They're trapped in a house about 6 blocks from here. They need help." The man who had thrown the rope, he wore a police officer's uniform, though it was soaked and muddy, knelt beside him. "I'm Officer Wade. Listen, son, we've got boats coming, but they can't launch until the surge passes. It's too dangerous right now." "But they won't survive another surge." Marcus tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. "Please, Tyrell's dad died saving us. I promised to take care of him." A woman appeared with a blanket, wrapping it around his shoulders. As she did, Marcus caught sight of something that made his heart stop, a familiar face in the crowd of survivors. Marcus. "Oh my God, Marcus!" His mother burst through the group, pulling him into a fierce embrace. She was soaked and exhausted looking, but alive. "I've been so worried," she sobbed. "When the water came, I tried to get home, but—" "Mom!" Marcus interrupted, pulling back to look at her. "Mom, you have to help. You're a nurse. Tyrell's hurt bad, and there's an old lady who needs help too. Please." His mother's face set in a determined expression he knew well. She turned to Officer Wade. "I'm coming with you when the boats launch. These people need medical attention." "Ma'am, it's not safe," Wade began, but she cut him off. "I'm a registered nurse, and you'll need medical personnel. Besides," she looked at Marcus with a mix of pride and worry, "my son just swam through a hurricane to get help. We're not abandoning those people." A crackling radio interrupted them. "Wade, you copy? The surge is hitting north of you. Water's rising fast in your sector. If you're launching rescue boats, it has to be now." Wade looked at Marcus. "Can you show us where they are?" Marcus nodded, though his entire body screamed for rest. "I marked the route in my head, used landmarks." "All right," Wade said, turning to his team. "We've got 2 rescue boats on the roof. We launch in 5 minutes." He looked at Marcus's mother. "Carter," she supplied. "Sarah Carter. Miss Carter, get whatever medical supplies you can gather. Marcus, you're with me. We'll take the lead boat." As people rushed to prepare, Marcus looked out the window toward where he'd left the others. The rain had intensified again, and he could barely see past the first row of houses. Somewhere out there, Tyrell was waiting, trusting that his best friend would return with help. But the water was still rising and the night wasn't over yet. The rescue boat pitched violently as another wave crashed over its bow. Marcus clung to the side, his eyes straining through the darkness toward where he'd left the others. His mother sat beside him, one hand gripping his shoulder, the other clutching a waterproof medical kit. Officer Wade handled the boat's motor with grim determination, while his partner, Officer Chen, used a spotlight to illuminate their path. "There!" Marcus shouted over the storm's roar, pointing to a partially submerged street sign. "We need to turn left here. The house is 2 blocks down." The second rescue boat followed close behind, its own spotlight sweeping the floodwaters for obstacles and survivors. The water level had risen significantly in the short time since Marcus had made his swim, and many of the landmarks he'd used were now completely submerged. "Marcus," his mother's voice was steady despite her obvious fear, "tell me more about Tyrell's injury. I need to know what to expect." "It's his arm," Marcus said, the image of his friend's pale face haunting him. "He got cut on a broken banister. We tried to stop the bleeding with my shirt, but it wasn't working very well." He swallowed hard. "And Mrs. Chen, the grandmother, her leg is broken. She couldn't move at all." Sarah Carter nodded, her nurse's training taking over. "Officer Wade," she called out. "We need to be extremely careful moving Mrs. Chen. If it's a compound fracture and we move her wrong." A massive crash interrupted her. Through the rain, they saw a house collapsing in on itself, sending waves rippling across the floodwaters. The boat rocked dangerously, and Marcus heard shouts from the second vessel behind them. "Wade!" Officer Chen called out urgently. "The other boat's motor is struggling. They're taking on water," Wade cursed under his breath. "Chen, signal them to fall back to the school. We'll continue alone." The loss of the second boat hit Marcus like a physical blow. How would they get everyone out with just one vessel? But before he could dwell on this new problem, he spotted something through the rain that made his heart leap. "There! That's the house." The building was still standing, but barely. Water had reached the second-floor windows and the entire structure groaned under the storm's assault. The attic window where they'd left the others was dark. "Tyrell!" Marcus shouted as Wade maneuvered the boat closer. "Sophie! We're here!" For a moment there was no response, and Marcus felt his chest tighten with fear. Then a flashlight beam appeared in the attic window. Sophie's light, the one she'd given him to find his way back. "Marcus!" Tyrell's weak voice carried down to them. "You came back." "Course I did," Marcus called back, fighting tears of relief. "And I brought help. My mom's here. She's a nurse." Wade and Chen secured the boat to the house while Sarah prepared her medical supplies. But just as they were about to attempt the rescue, a sound rose above the storm that made everyone freeze, the deep, resonant groan of metal under extreme stress. "The water main!" Wade shouted. "Everyone, hold on!" The underground water main running beneath the street had finally given way under the flood's pressure. The resulting explosion sent a geyser of water shooting upward, creating a massive surge that slammed into the house. The entire structure shifted on its foundation. "We have to get them out now!" Sarah screamed, watching as new cracks appeared in the walls. Wade and Chen sprang into action, helping Sarah through the attic window. Marcus tried to follow, but Wade held him back. "Stay in the boat, son," he ordered. "We need you to help when we bring them down." Agonizing minutes passed as Marcus waited, listening to the sounds of movement above. The house continued to groan and shift, each sound making him flinch. Finally, Sophie appeared at the window, helped down by Chen. She was crying, but otherwise seemed unhurt. Next came Mrs. Chen, carefully lowered using rescue equipment, her face tight with pain but remaining remarkably calm. Sarah and Wade worked together to secure her in the boat's center, where she would have the most stability. "Tyrell's really weak," Sophie told Marcus as they helped make Mrs. Chen comfortable. "Your mom's giving him something to help. With the pain." She didn't need to finish. Marcus could hear the worry in her voice, could see it in the way his mother's hands shook as she finally helped Tyrell through the window. His friend's skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and the makeshift bandage on his arm was soaked through with both water and blood. "The house is going." Officer Chen's shout galvanized everyone into action. The walls were buckling, the attic floor beginning to cave in. Chen practically jumped into the boat, while Wade had to pull Sarah in as she refused to leave Tyrell's side, still trying to secure a proper bandage on his arm. The boat's motor roared to life just as the house gave its final groan. Marcus watched in horror as the structure began to collapse in on itself, creating a whirlpool that tried to pull them back. Wade gunned the motor, but the current fought them, spinning the boat around. "We're too heavy," Chen shouted. "The motor can't handle it." The school's lights seemed impossibly far away now, and their boat was sitting dangerously low in the water. Wade looked at them all, then at the motor, and Marcus saw something change in his expression, the look of someone about to make an impossible choice. "Officer Chen," Wade said calmly, though his knuckles were white on the motor's handle, "you know what to do if I don't make it back." Before anyone could react, Wade stripped off his heavy utility belt and boots. "Get them to safety," he told Chen. Then he dove into the floodwaters. "No." Officer Chen lunged for the side of the boat, but Sarah grabbed her arm. "He's lightening the load," Sarah said, her voice tight with understanding. "We have to use this chance." The boat, freed from Wade's weight, rose slightly higher in the water. Chen took control of the motor, her face a mask of professional determination despite the tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. Behind them, they could see Wade swimming strongly against the current, using debris as temporary support while guiding them away from the whirlpool created by the collapsing house. Marcus held Tyrell's hand as his mother worked to properly bandage his friend's arm. The professional medical supplies were already making a difference. The bleeding had slowed and Sarah had given him something for the pain. But Tyrell's grip was still weak, his skin cold and clammy. "Your dad would be proud of you," Marcus whispered to his friend. "So proud." Tyrell's eyes filled with tears. "He'd be proud of you too," he managed. "You came back, just like he would have." Sophie sat with her grandmother, both of them huddled under an emergency blanket Chen had pulled from the boat's supply. Mrs. Chen was handling the pain of her broken leg with remarkable stoicism, though every bump and wave made her wince. "Look," Sophie suddenly called out, pointing behind them. "Officer Wade!" They all turned to see Wade had managed to grab onto a floating piece of wooden fencing. He was using it like a makeshift surfboard, letting the current help push him in their direction while steering with strong swimming strokes. "He's going to make it," Chen said, hope creeping into her voice. "Come on, John, come on!" But then another sound rose above the storm's chaos, the deep rumble of approaching water. The surge from the broken levee was finally reaching them. "Everyone, hold on!" Chen shouted, gunning the motor. Fucky. Boat jumped forward just as the wall of water hit. Marcus felt himself lifted up as the boat crested the first massive wave. His mother threw herself over Tyrell, protecting him, while Chen fought with the motor to keep them from capsizing. Through the spray and chaos, Marcus caught a final glimpse of Wade. The officer had seen the surge coming and was paddling furiously toward a nearby two-story house, trying to reach it before the wave hit. Then the surge was upon them, and Marcus could see nothing but water and darkness. The next few minutes were a blur of terror and desperate prayer. The boat was tossed around like a toy, with Chen somehow managing to keep them upright through skill and sheer determination. Sarah continued treating Tyrell even as waves crashed over the bow, her medical training winning out over her fear. Mrs. Chen and Sophie clung to each other, the grandmother whispering what sounded like prayers in Chinese. When the worst of the surge passed, they found themselves much closer to the school than before. The wall of water had actually pushed them in the right direction. The building's lights were still burning, a beacon of hope in the storm. "We're almost there," Chen called out, her voice hoarse from shouting over the wind. "Just hold on a little longer." But Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Wade. The officer had sacrificed his place in the boat to save them, just as Joseph had given his life to save Marcus and Tyrell. The weight of their sacrifices pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. "Marcus," his mother's voice cut through his thoughts. "I need your help with Tyrell. Talk to him. Keep him awake." Tyrell's eyes had begun to close, his head nodding despite the boat's violent movement. The blood loss and trauma were taking their toll. "Hey," Marcus squeezed his friend's hand. "Remember that time your dad took us fishing, and you were scared to put the worm on the hook?" A weak smile flickered across Tyrell's face. "You were scared too," he whispered. "Yeah, but your dad showed us how. He said being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what needs to be done anyway." Marcus swallowed hard. "Like you did tonight. Like he did. Look," Sophie's voice cut through the emotional moment. "There's people on the roof." The school was close now, its roof lined with rescue workers ready to help them. As Chen maneuvered the boat toward the building's emergency stairs, Marcus saw something that made his heart leap. Another rescue boat was pulling someone from the water about a block away. "It's Wade!" Chen cried out, recognizing her partner's bright yellow safety vest. "He made it!" The relief that flooded through the boat was palpable. They had all made it. Against impossible odds, through sacrifice and courage and a little bit of luck, they had survived. But as rescue workers helped them from the boat, Marcus knew their journey wasn't quite over. Tyrell needed immediate medical attention. Mrs. Chen's leg would require surgery, and all of them would carry the emotional scars of this night for years to come. Yet something else had been born in the floodwaters, a deeper understanding of what it meant to be brave, to sacrifice for others, to keep going when all hope seemed lost. As Marcus watched Wade being helped onto the roof, exhausted but alive, he thought about Joseph's final words. Take care of each other. That's what they had all done tonight. That's what had saved them. Sarah hugged Marcus close as medical personnel rushed to help Tyrell and Mrs. Chen. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "But don't you ever do anything like that again." Marcus managed a small smile, though tears were running down his face. "I had to, Mom. They needed help. Dad always says sometimes you have to be scared and brave at the same time." His mother's breath caught at the mention of Marcus's father, who was still out there somewhere in the flood. But before she could respond, a commotion near the roof access door caught their attention. The roof access door burst open, and a group of rescue workers rushed through carrying someone. On a stretcher, Marcus felt his mother's grip on his shoulder tighten as the stretcher passed under one of the emergency lights, revealing its occupant. "David!" Sarah's voice cracked with emotion as she recognized her husband, Marcus's father. David. Carter was conscious but clearly exhausted, his clothes torn and muddy. His left leg was bandaged, but he was already trying to sit up, his eyes scanning the crowd desperately until they found Marcus and Sarah. "Stay still, sir," one of the rescue workers urged. "That leg needs attention." But David reached out for his family, and they were there in an instant, wrapped in a tight embrace that said more than words ever could. Marcus buried his face in his father's wet shirt, breathing in the familiar scent that mixed now with floodwater and mud. "I tried to get home," David explained, his voice rough. "When the water started rising, I was helping evacuate the construction site. Then I saw Tyrell's mom." Marcus's head snapped up. "Miss Jackson, is she—" "She's safe," David assured him quickly. "She's downstairs in the cafeteria, helping the medical team. She's been worried sick about Tyrell. Where is he?" As if on cue, a commotion arose from where the medical personnel were treating Tyrell. Marcus turned to see his friend's eyes flutter open as his mother's voice cut through the noise. "Tyrell, baby, I'm here!" Angela Jackson pushed through the crowd to reach her son, her nurse's uniform soaked and dirty, but her movements precise and professional, even in her emotional state. She immediately began checking Tyrell's vitals, working alongside Sarah, who quickly filled her in on his condition. "The bleeding's under control," Sarah explained, "but he needs a hospital as soon as possible." "Helicopters are coming," Officer Chen announced, returning from a consultation with the rescue coordinators. "Coast Guard says they'll be here within the hour, weather permitting. They'll evacuate the most critical cases first." Wade, now wrapped in a blanket but still standing tall despite his ordeal, joined them. "Mrs. Chen and Tyrell will be on the first flight out. The hospital in Baton Rouge is ready for them." Sophie, who hadn't left Mrs. Chen's side, looked up at this news. "Can I go with my grandmother?" Wade knelt beside her. "Your parents have been contacted, Sophie. They're safe, and they'll meet you at the hospital. You were so brave tonight looking after your grandmother." Mrs. Chen reached out to squeeze Sophie's hand. "You stayed with me when I told you to go," she said softly. "Just like your mother would have done. So stubborn." But there was pride in her voice. And love. Marcus moved to Tyrell's side as Angela and Sarah continued their medical care. His friend's color was better now, and his grip was stronger when he caught Marcus's hand. "Did you hear?" Tyrell whispered. "They found your dad." Marcus nodded, wiping at his eyes. "Yeah, and your mom's here too." He paused, then added, "I wish—" Tyrell's voice caught. "I wish my dad could see this. See that we made it." "He can," Marcus said with quiet conviction. "Remember what he always told us? That love is like a circle. It doesn't end, it just keeps going around and around. He's still here, Tyrell, in what he taught us, in what he did for us." Angela paused in her medical duties to brush tears from her eyes, overheard the boys' conversation. "That sounds just like Joseph," she said softly. "Always finding ways to explain big things in ways you boys could understand." The storm still raged outside, but its power seemed diminished now, as if it knew its time was passing. The school building creaked and shuddered but held firm, a sanctuary in the chaos, just as it had been during normal days when its halls were filled with children's voices and dreams of the future. David, now sitting up despite the medical team's protests, looked at his son with a mixture of pride and lingering fear. "Marcus," he said, "tell me what happened. How did you end? Up out there in the flood?" So Marcus told them everything, about playing football when the water came, about losing Joseph, about the desperate swim to the school, and the rescue attempt. Wade and Chen added their parts of the story, and Sophie filled in what happened in her grandmother's house. As the tale unfolded, other survivors gathered to listen, drawn by the story of ordinary people finding extraordinary courage in the face of disaster. "Joseph always said that true strength isn't about being fearless," Angela said when the story was done. her hand still holding Tyrell's. "It's about being afraid and doing what's right anyway. He'd be so proud of all of you." A distant sound cut through the storm, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors approaching. The Coast Guard had arrived, bringing with them the promise of safety and medical care for those who needed it most. As the rescue workers began preparing Tyrell and Mrs. Chen for evacuation, Marcus felt a strange mix of emotions wash over him. The night's events had changed them all, marking them in ways that would take time to fully understand. But something else had emerged from the floodwaters, a deeper appreciation for the bonds between people, for the courage that lives in ordinary hearts, for the love that, like Joseph's circle, never truly ends. The helicopter's searchlight cut through the rain, illuminating the roof in harsh white light. But Marcus wasn't watching the aircraft's approach. Instead, his eyes were drawn to the eastern horizon, where the first faint light of dawn was beginning to break through the storm clouds. The longest night was finally coming to an end, but its story, their story, was just beginning. 1 month later. The September sun beat down on the reconstruction site where Marcus's father worked, turning the air thick and humid. Marcus sat on a stack of lumber, watching volunteers and construction crews work to rebuild what Katrina had destroyed. The neighborhood was different now. Some houses were gone completely, others were slowly being restored, and everywhere there were signs of both destruction and renewal. "Here," Tyrell said, handing Marcus a bottle of water as he joined him. On the lumber pile, his friend's arm was still in a sling, but the doctor said he was healing well. The scar would remain, a permanent reminder of that terrible night. But like so many things, it had become part of their story. "Your mom said you're starting back at school next week," Marcus said, taking a drink. Tyrell nodded. "Yeah, they fixed up most of the damage. It's weird, though. Everything looks the same but different, you know?" Marcus knew exactly what his friend meant. They'd all changed that night, in ways that went far deeper than physical scars or rebuilt walls. The floodwaters had washed away their childhood innocence, replacing it with something more complex, an understanding of both human fragility and human strength. "Hey, boys," Angela Jackson called out, approaching with a cooler. She'd taken a leave of absence from her nursing job to help with the community recovery efforts, working alongside Sarah Carter to provide medical care for the reconstruction crews. "Would you mind taking some water to the volunteers over by the Thompson place?" As they distributed water bottles, Marcus and Tyrell passed Sophie and Mrs. Chen's old house. Sophie's family had relocated to Baton Rouge to be closer to Mrs. Chen while she recovered from surgery, but they came back every weekend to help with the rebuilding. The house itself was beyond repair, but Sophie's father had already drawn up plans for a new one, stronger, higher off the ground but on the same plot of land. Some routes, they'd learned, were too deep to abandon. "Marcus, Tyrell!" Officer Wade's voice carried across the street. He and Officer Chen were helping coordinate the volunteer effort, their presence a constant reminder that community meant more than just living in the same neighborhood. The boys jogged over to where Wade was studying building plans spread across the hood of his patrol car. "How would you two feel about helping us set up for the memorial service tomorrow?" he asked. The memorial. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Tomorrow marked 1 month since Katrina, and the community was gathering to remember those they'd lost, including Joseph. The service would be held in the school gymnasium, the same building that had sheltered so many during the storm. "We'll help," Tyrell said quietly, his good hand finding the St. Christopher medal that had belonged to his father now hanging around his neck. "Dad would want us to." Later that afternoon, as the sun began to set, Marcus sat on his front porch with his parents. Their house had suffered damage, but was slowly being repaired. His father's leg was healing, though he still used a cane, and his mother had returned to her regular nursing shifts at the hospital. But the real healing, Marcus knew, was happening in less visible ways. "I got a letter from Mrs. Chen today," Sarah said, showing them the envelope. "Her surgery went well, and she's starting physical therapy. Sophie's been reading to her every day." "That girl's got spirit," David remarked, adjusting his leg on the porch step. "Reminds me of someone else I know." He looked meaningfully at his son. Marcus felt his face grow warm. He still wasn't comfortable being called brave or a hero, words he'd heard too often in the past month. "I just did what anyone would do," he said, the same response he'd given to reporters who tried to interview him about that night. "No, son," David said gently. "You did what Joseph taught you to do, what he showed all of us how to do. Take care of each other, no matter what." From inside the house, they heard the phone ring. Sarah went to answer it, returning moments later, with a smile. "That was Angela. She and Tyrell are coming over for dinner. She's making Joseph's famous gumbo recipe." The mention of Joseph's gumbo brought both smiles and tears. It had been his signature dish, the one he'd make for every birthday, every celebration, every time someone needed comforting. Now it had become a way of keeping his memory alive, of passing his love forward. As twilight settled over New Orleans, more neighbors emerged onto their porches, following what had become an evening ritual since the storm. They called out greetings, shared news about rebuilding progress, offered help where it was needed. Children played in yards that were slowly returning to life, their laughter a defiant response to the destruction that had tried to silence it. Tomorrow they would gather to remember what they'd lost. They would speak Joseph's name, along with the names of others who hadn't survived the storm. They would cry together, hold each other, share stories that needed to be told and heard. But they would also celebrate what remained, the bonds between neighbors, the strength they'd found in each other, the love that, like Joseph had said, moved in an unbroken circle. They would look toward a future that, while forever changed, still held promise. Marcus felt Tyrell's approach before he saw him, their friendship deepened by shared experience into something like brotherhood. Angela followed with a pot of gumbo that filled the air with familiar spices, and soon other neighbors began drifting over, drawn by the scent and the company. As the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had been hidden by storm. Clouds that terrible night. Marcus listened to the voices of his community rising and falling around him. They spoke of loss and hope, of remembrance and renewal, of a future they would build together. The floodwaters had taken much from them, but they hadn't taken everything. They hadn't taken the most important things, the lessons Joseph had taught, the courage they'd found in each other, the love that sustained them through the darkest hours. In the end, that was what remained after the storm. Not just survival, but the understanding that the strongest foundations aren't built of brick and mortar, but of the connections between people. The knowledge that true courage often comes not in grand gestures, but in simple acts of kindness and sacrifice. The certainty that even in the darkest nights, dawn eventually comes, and in that dawn, they would rise together, carrying forward the legacy of those they'd lost, building something new from the wreckage of what had been. Not just houses and streets, but a community bound together by shared experience and unwavering hope. As the evening deepened into night, Marcus looked up at the clear sky and whispered words he'd heard Joseph say so many times. Love is like a circle. It doesn't end, it just keeps going around and around. In the gentle night breeze, he could almost hear Joseph's voice answering back, carried on the wind that now brought only stars instead of storms, promising that some things, the most important things, could never be washed away. A message to our audience. Dear friends, we hope you enjoyed this story as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to do so. Your subscription means the world to us and helps us keep sharing amazing and heartfelt stories with you. Your feedback is incredibly important to us. Did you like the story? Please leave a comment and let us know what you think. It helps us continue creating stories that resonate and inspire. Right now, a playlist of more stories from our channel is appearing on your screen. We invite you to explore and enjoy these other captivating tales. Thank you for being part of our journey. We look forward to sharing more stories with you soon. Until next time.